What can a woman do when her husband or her lover abuses her, threatens her, injures her? There's always 911, of course, a call to the local police. But what if the abuser himself is a police officer? According to a former police chief in Portland, Oregon, there are credible statistics that estimate 2 of every 5 police officers nationwide are themselves guilty of domestic abuse. And it turns out that too many of these abusers are protected by the so-called blue wall of silence. Not disciplined, not demoted, certainly not arrested, too often protected by a cover-up. But now there's been a break in that wall of silence, largely because of a sharp light focused on a dirty secret at the LAPD. It all began in the Los Angeles suburb of Glendale, California, in 1992.
Please.
This woman's sister, 26-year-old Melba Ramos, had been gunned down by her husband, an officer in the Los Angeles Police Department.
When we responded to the location early this morning, the officers entered, found the children in one bedroom upstairs. They found 3 dead bodies in this apartment, all dead of gunshot wounds.
Gunshots fired from the semi-automatic weapon issued to police officer Victor Ramos. It turned out there had been plenty of warning signs before the tragedy. 3 months earlier, Ramos, devastated by his failing marriage, had stormed into his wife's office, beat her up, threatened her with his gun, and trashed the place. The police were called to the scene, and according to California law, Victor Ramos should have been arrested then and there, but he wasn't. Fact is, thanks to his being a police officer, nothing much happened to him at all.
They took his gun away for about a week and gave it back to him. He went back on street duty and ultimately went to her home, killed her boyfriend, and then killed himself.
That's Bob Mullally. All in all, he had put in about 30 years of government service before he was hired by the attorneys representing the families of Officer Ramos' victims. They were suing the city of Los Angeles, claiming the murders could have been prevented if only the LAPD had handled the Victor Ramos case properly, arresting him, taking his gun away, and prosecuting him. Dana Tashner was one of the attorneys retained by the victims' families.
At the time we filed the lawsuit, the city of Los Angeles did not keep any statistics for domestic violence crimes involving police officers.
So Tashner asked the court to provide access to confidential files from the LAPD's Department of Internal Affairs. These files would include any complaints of family abuse against LAPD officers over a period of 3 years. He wanted to see if there was a pattern. The judge agreed to release the files, but only after they were sealed with a protective order to keep them from public view.
It was Mullally's job to review each file, each page, each incident, and somehow cohesively digest them into a summarized form so that a judge or a jury could understand the contents of that 3 or 4 feet of documents.
Those raw files contained allegations against police officers that ranged from threats and messy marital spats to rapes and serious assaults. They detailed how the LAPD had investigated and handled the allegations. And that was important because Mullally needed to show that what happened in the Victor Ramos affair was by no means an isolated occurrence.
We were arguing that he wasn't the only one who behaved this way and was allowed to get away with it. And that's how we got the files. And that's how I was able to determine that, in fact, that was true. They did allow other officers to commit these kind of acts without any penalty.
And not just in Los Angeles. Penny Harrington once served as chief of police in Portland, Oregon.
Based on the research that we had reviewed on police family violence, that over 40% of the police officers in the United States admit that they use violence in their own families.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
2 out of 5 cops in the United States use violence in their own families?
Self-admitted that they do.
Today, Harrington runs a group called the National Center for Women in Policing, along with Catherine Spiller.
You get a personality frequently attracted to law enforcement that's into the use of force and into the use of violence. And it translates into the home in far larger numbers than in the general population.
Why have we never heard about this?
It's been covered up. The police never arrested their own officers for family violence. They treated it as a internal problem.
And as we've seen in police department after police department around the country, all too frequently, they're not investigated. And even in those cases where a police officer is found to have used violence against his wife or his girlfriend, there's very few consequences, maybe some days off for discipline, very few are referred for prosecution, and it never seems to affect their careers.
Bob Mullally says that is exactly what he was seeing in those LAPD files. Out of the 79 cases he looked at, the Los Angeles Police Department had never arrested one of their own. And while a few had been arrested by other police agencies, none were ever prosecuted.
I became terribly angered by what I was seeing. The violence, the level of violence, many broken bones, contusions, lacerations, ruptured liver. In one case, a pregnant woman, 8 months pregnant, is battered.
And yet these are the very officers who are sent to investigate cases or to stop cases of domestic abuse.
These are people who are certified to carry loaded guns and walk behind badges who are still walking around with loaded guns in Los Angeles today as we speak.
Attorney Dana Tashner says it was clear to him that Mullally was deeply disturbed by what he saw in those files.
Perhaps halfway through, I think Bob was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, ready to crack because of what he perceived to be as carnage reflected in those files.
Mullally says he even thought of quitting, but he didn't.
I made up my mind that this information was going to become public one way or another, either through trial or whatever means I might have to take to ensure that the public understood what was going on within the Los Angeles Police Department.
But the case never went to trial, for when the attorneys for the city of Los Angeles saw the results of Mullally's work, they advised the city council to settle the whole thing out of court. In a closed session, out of the public eye, the LA City Council heard the gory details and quickly approved the settlement with the victims' families. The price tag for the Ramos affair? $2.15 million of taxpayers' money. And that settlement satisfied everyone but Bob Mullally. You thought the city council would rise up and do something?
I did.
And?
They did nothing. One of them said that she had to hold her nose. Well, they paid the settlement. I was deeply offended by that. There was not one expression from one person about the well-being of one single victim.
And Bob Mullally was so angered that he decided to violate the law. He made those confidential files available to a reporter from the CBS affiliate in Los Angeles.
Investigative reporter Harvey Levin joins us tonight with this exclusive story.
I've obtained 79 confidential internal affairs files on LAPD cops accused of committing domestic violence. The real story is the way the LAPD handled it, buried it, and justified it.
After this story broke big, we approached leaders in the city council and demanded a full-scale investigation of the LAPD, its policies and practices when they learned that a police officer was involved in domestic violence. We wanted an accounting because we thought it was vastly ignored by the top command in the LAPD.
The city council asked the LAPD's Inspector General, Catherine Mader, to investigate. And her report substantiated many of the things Bob Mullally was saying, among them, that there were many repeat offenders, that discipline was exceedingly light given the seriousness of the charges, that 1 out of 3 officers with proven complaints of family violence were nonetheless promoted. The chief of police at the city of Los Angeles today is a fellow by the name of Bernard Parks. He was in charge of internal affairs. So chances are, what you allege, he had to know.
He had to know, as did all the top echelon of the LAPD, especially some of these aggravated ones that we saw in Catherine Mader's report, where there were rapes, where there were serious assaults.
They're brutal.
Yes, they are brutal.
Some of them.
The top command had to know.
Chief Bernard Parks and the LAPD declined our repeated requests for an interview. So did the Police Protective League, the police union. So we sat down with David Dotson, who was with the LAPD for 34 years and was assistant chief when he retired in 1992.
Well, I think it was clear over the years that officers were handled differently than any private citizen would be. I think there's an attitudinal problem that still exists among people who are in male-dominated organizations, in that, to put it bluntly, that maybe she deserved what she got when she was abused.
After the Inspector General's report, the LAPD formed a special unit to deal with domestic violence by police officers. And Catherine Mader, who has now left the police department, concedes that Mullally set off the whole chain of events when he gave those files to the KCBS reporter.
Harvey Levin's report spawned the City Council's concern. The City Council's concern spawned the investigation by the Office of the Inspector General, and the investigation spawned the Domestic Violence Unit in Internal Affairs, and I think a complete turnaround in the way the department handles internal acts of domestic violence.
But the LAPD still wanted to know who had leaked the files. And that is when Mullally stepped forward and signed a declaration saying that he alone was responsible for blowing the whistle. And that triggered big trouble for him. First, he was sued by two officers whose names had surfaced in the TV report. Then the city and the LAPD went to federal court to charge him with criminal contempt.
It shows you how hard this department will fight to keep this information bottled up.
Dana Tashner thinks it's that and more.
And I have to think it's much larger than Bob Mullally, that it goes to any citizen's or lawyer's ability to access these very sensitive police records.
Is it conceivable that they're trying to say to potential whistleblowers in the future, hey, you do it and you'll go to jail?
Oh, sure.
But according to Deputy City Attorney Tim McCosker, when Mullally violated that personal privacy protective order, nothing less than the integrity of the court system was threatened.
As an attorney, I mean, I have an obligation to the court. As a human being, I know that Mr. Mullally is free to act on his conscience and do what he would like to do. There may be consequences.
The judge told Mullally this: you aren't bigger than the law. You have no right to break the law because it's your whim. That's basically what he's saying, no?
That's correct. He said pretty much that he might well put me in jail for it.
I don't support the fact that people should just go out willy-nilly and violate the law. But if Bob's willing to suffer the consequences for what he did, then I, for one, admire him.
You regard this as an act of civil disobedience, and therefore you're willing to face the possibility of jail?
Yes, I am. If it corrects the behavior, I believe that it would be worth that sacrifice.